Hi guys, I have been broadcasting to no one for about 15 minutes. I apologize in advance if you signed on right at 5 p.m. and couldn't find me. Like I said, I've been broadcasting to absolutely no one for 13 minutes so far. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll go through this quickly. Again, you can watch it afterwards. I am going to tell you that my dogs are in the bedroom, right there. So if there's any barking, I'm going to try to limit that. But I just wanted to make sure that you know. So right now, if you look in the group, I'm gonna post it in the group chat. I'm also going to put it into the highlights. Those are both of the PDFs that is the PDF that we're going to look at. We are going to switch back and forth between a couple of other streams, but that should be pretty easy and fluid, at least a little more fluid than last time. So let's go ahead and get started and let's get started with PowerPoint right now. All right, so you can see my PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and present it. This will limit whether or not I can see you. So please send me an email, send me a text, send me something, send me a comment, and let me know if you cannot actually see it. Okay, so here we go. This is the webinar for SNHU. It's not working. Let's try this one more time. All right, creative nonfiction webinar. Same deal as last time. It's me, Angelina Overdale. And this is English 226, Introduction to Creative Genres, and it's the summer of 2015. Here we go. The topics we are going to be sharing today and going over today are creative nonfiction, the importance of creative nonfiction, and how to read creative nonfiction. We are also going to talk about your memoir specifically, including imagery, applying voice, and one of my favorite authors and former professors, Robert William Butler, and what he has to say about this. Then we're going to talk about workshop and its importance because I liked what I saw in workshop last week, but I do think there are some ways to improve. The very last thing that we're going to do is we're going to review the portfolio requirements. That's, again, the largest part of your grade, and it's the largest part of your grade, and it also is where we're heading. Okay, so the importance of creative nonfiction. First of all, creative nonfiction is really popular right now. Creative nonfiction includes blogs. One of my favorite bloggers is John Warner. He writes fun, interesting blogs about everything. I left a link for you to one of his blogs about UFC and a couple of other sort of random and erratic things. But John Warner is a really great blogger. And there's blogs for everything, okay? Not just mine, but everything, really everything. So blogs are really popular, and they are one form of creative nonfiction. Often they are strictly nonfiction, but quite often they're creative as well, and they incorporate the creative aspects as well as telling the story. Okay. If you want to read more articles by John Warner, I am going to post a link to him in the showcase. It should be loading right now. In addition to blogs, memoirs are getting published left and right. There are even memoirs written theoretically by dogs. So memoirs are they're a large part of our society right now. We seem to want to learn and enjoy learning through other people's experiences. In fact, I looked up some numbers, and according to Goodreads, there are 251 new memoirs, just in case you are interested in reading some. So reading creative nonfiction. As a reminder, you should be reading like a writer. You're not just reading to get information. You're reading to understand the text and the author's choices. To do this, here are some things that you should try to do. First, figure out how the text and piece is written and how well. Try to understand the author's purpose. Determine how or if the author achieves his or her purpose. And they don't always, so trust your experience. Trust that you know whether or not an author achieves his or her purpose. Trust that you can also critique other people's writing. Pay attention and learn from the organization and the style of memoirs. In a memoir, you can use flashbacks, you can use dialogue, so pay attention to how they are organized. Also consider the details that the author includes. Remember that he or she is writing for the reader, not his or her own record. Indeed, William Zinsser says that, let me show you right down here. Oh, I did that. This might be a better way to do it anyway. Indeed, William Zinsser says that you don't have to include the exact details of a memoir. Sometimes you have to leave a sister or a brother out. And this, especially if you want to talk about just your relationship with your parents, including all the information about your brother and your sister might not actually better inform the reader. So write for the reader, not for yourself. This isn't a diary. Make sure that the details you include are for the reader, not for you. Okay? And don't forget about imagery. This is important in poetry, but it shouldn't be forgotten in creative nonfiction. Remember, like your book says, the images are the living pictures, the movie in the reader's mind, that your writing creates the mental images on the screen of the reader, or creates images on the mental screen of your reader. The images should be real. When you dream, you see things. The same with reading. When you're reading a great piece of writing, your imagination is activated. You can see, smell, hear, and touch. Like I said, images are important in creative nonfiction as they are in poetry, because they are even, and maybe they are even more important because we tell a story and forget sometimes to show it. I think this happened in a lot of your discussion boards the first time we talked about setting, but we'll get there in just a minute. Here's another good quote. I gave you guys this link before. It's from my favorite chapter in a book on poetry, actually, called Western Wind. Again, I'm going to put it in the showcase. So if you don't have the PowerPoint, you do have this. So it says that when Einstein tried to describe his scientific work, he had recourse time and again to the concreteness of visual imagery. Instead of saying quantum reality is not random, he said more than once, God does not play dice with the universe. Instead of saying that radiation came only in specific quanta, he said that radiation was like beer in a keg that would be dispensed in pint-sized bottles. So remember to create that vivid picture for your readers. That goes along with voice and tone. Voice and tone are two things that you can actually create with images and setting. We've talked about all of this in our discussion boards, but I just want to reiterate what we've talked about. Okay? We focused on voice when we wrote poetry, so there's a lot of resources for it in Module 2. Remember that in creative nonfiction, the voice of the writer is actually the same as the voice of the speaker, which is often not the case in creative or in poetry. I was really impressed by your descriptions in the discussion board last week, your settings. I think that you've all learned a little bit about putting the setting first and the story second. It seemed to be like you were either good at doing that in your first post or you were good at doing that again later. I think you've all learned a little about, again, putting the setting first and the story second. A lot of times the setting and the world of the story is how the reader really understands it. Okay. So here's some additional thoughts. And I'm actually going to show you this interview that's kind of PG-13. The readings in Module 4 just keep reminding me of Robert Olen Butler. He is an author of, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's also an author of a handful of novels and the book From Where You Dream, The Process of Writing Fiction. He suggests that you do a couple of things. The suggestions about the writing process in his book that make the most sense to me is this. So I've said this a little before, but it's good to reiterate it. To use index card to organize your plot, especially if you're writing a short story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you want to eventually be part of a larger novel. You can then, decide by experimenting with moving the plot around what details you need to add, what order they should be in, etc. Your textbook also discusses energy and tension. Butler wraps this up into the concept of yearning in his book, something that your characters must do. That's essentially what we relate to the yearning of the characters. We are closely going to look at this interview called Semi-Inappropriately and an interview with Robert Olen Butler. Let me pull this one up for you. I'm going to make sure it's on the right screen. Okay, so Robert Olen Butler says, fuck sentimentality, essentially. To love and to express is to be vulnerable. To create works of art is to be vulnerable. It's hard for people to let themselves do that, to be vulnerable, especially in this world where the internet lets us democratically savage one another. It's even scarier. But the courage to be an artist also means the courage to love and to express it. So here's what he says in this interview with Emily Alfred. He was working, at the time of the interview, he was working on his 19th book, a novel called A Small Hotel, which was published shortly after this interview was. There's a couple things that he says that I just want to go over. So here's what she suggests, and here's what she talks about. And Emily Alfred actually had a workshop with Robert Olen Butler. Sorry. Sorry, I lost it. Here we go. We're back up. All right. So here's the deal. Emily asked him, so writing your book on, rewriting the book that I just discussed, From Where You Dream, he explains that literary fiction must come from characters driven by yearning. So she asked him, what is yearning? Robert Irwin Butler said that yearning seems to be at the heart of what fiction as an art form is all about. And this is true for creative nonfiction as well, which we're moving towards, so it's good to discuss here. It's based on the fact that fiction is a temporal art form. It exists in time. And so it's an art form about human beings and their theories. Any Buddhist will tell you that as a human being on this planet, you can't exist for even 30 seconds without desiring something. My favorite word is yearning because it suggests the deepest level of desire. My approach to teaching writing tries to get an essential qualities for the process from the aspiring artist beyond what is inherent to the study of craft and technique. This notion of yearning has its reflection in one of the most fundamental points, craft points in the fiction, plot. So yearning will help the plot, because plot is simply yearning, challenged, and thwarted, and hopefully maybe can come to. So here's the deal. You sit with the character, whether it's yourself or someone else. You sit with the character, you hear the character's voice, you get to feel the character because she's emerging from your deep unconscious, not as you, but as a stranger in the dream, which we all have. I find that this is true. I find that this is true in writing creative nonfiction as well. But anyway, so you'll be tempted because of the way you've been trained in craft and technique, and indeed the way you've been trained in literature, especially at university levels. You'll be tempted to try to translate her into ideas and themes and structures and descriptions of her psyche and desires. But with yearning, as with all elements of character, I advise just being with her in the way that you're with another human being. Think of the process of somebody or meeting somebody where chemistry that allows for that. It's sort of proximity or awareness. So whether you're writing creative nonfiction or fiction, you need to be aware of yourself. You need to be aware of your character. If your character is yourself, think about what you were yearning for at the time of your story, at the moment of your memoir. And indeed, when you're writing your short story, do the same for your main character. Okay. All right. So I wish that I could transition a little bit more seamlessly, but that's okay. We can work with this. We are gonna continue with the PowerPoint. Right. Okay. Sorry about the barking. Okay. So here's the importance of the workshop, which is what I want to move on to, because the workshop, if you're going into creative writing, really if you're going into any field, you are going to have to collaborate with other people. This is incredibly, incredibly important in writing and in creative writing as well. You are always going to be collaborating with other people. Other people are also always going to be reading your work, especially if you're submitting it for publication. Our workshop is really important because at an introductory level, you have to learn both to accept and to give criticism. In fact, Annie Lamont, in the book that you're reading, writes that it's also good to get to know whom you can get together with for mutual support. It's very hard to continue writing on your own. kill the idea of the artist, of the lone artist, of the lone suffering artist. We suffer anyway as human beings. Don't make it any harder on yourself. I found this great article that I want to look at really quickly. It's about workshop and being in workshop. And it says, for most of us, writing is a somewhat solitary pursuit. After all, it's hard to actually work on a story if you're chatting with your mom, IMing your best friend, or grabbing lunch with your hubby. There comes a time in every writer's life when a certain kind of company becomes necessary. A certain type of company. I know it sounds very Elliot Spitzer-ish, but choosing who to talk to about your baby novel is a fraught process. Will they like it? Will they hate it? Will they think it's actually very funny or realize they stole all my jokes from my 10-year-old Leno shows? The best way to get talking about your novel is to start with strangers who write. The best way of finding them is writing classes. Writing classes are excellent for writers at any stage of their career. They're a safe place to talk, shop, learn tips, tricks, techniques, and commiserate over dialogue that falls flat and characters who refuse to behave. So there's a couple of things you want to do. First, polish your work before you submit it. Spend some time ensuring that your work is as polished as you can make it. This isn't for the critiquer's benefit, it's for yours. Your classmates aren't wasting time with line edits. They're more likely to pick up plot and character issues. Make a list of the things you'd like your critiquers to think about. It doesn't have to be long and detailed. Even 1 or 2 points is fine. If you can, write your list on the workshop copies or add a page about it. If you know certain people in your group have a skill set you could use, it's okay to even ask them to pay greater attention to the relevant sections of the text. Then the day of, or for us, the weekend. There's a couple things you need to do. You need to understand that you're human and that nobody gets everything right the first time around. Then you need to understand that your classmates are human and that nobody gets everything right the first time around. Critiquing is somewhat of an art form. I gave you my example in the last workshop, sort of how I sit down and do it. But here's what you need to do. I'm gonna switch back to myself. So here's what you need to do when you're looking at workshops. First of all, you have to adjust with the strengths and the weaknesses. So don't worry if you absolutely dislike a piece of work. You can still talk about it. You have to be able to pick out something that you like or something that the author does well, even if it's just, I like that your spelling is correct. You can probably say something nicer than that. But see what you can do. Find 1 or 2 things that are really nice. Point out 2 strengths, even if they're just comparative strengths, point them out. The other thing that you want to make sure you do is you want to make sure you adjust the weaknesses. Think about critique sandwiches. Start with the first part. Start with some good comments at the beginning. Work those specific critiques into the middle, and then come back to the things that you like the most. The other thing that you want to do, and that should help, is you want to be really specific about those critiques. I also want you guys to make sure that you express to the author that you fully understand what their piece of writing is about. I am going to highlight someone's critique from our class. I have her permission. I didn't attach it to the poem because I just sort of want to show you some of the things that she's doing well. Okay, so what she says in this is she says, I really enjoy your poem. Last weekend I thought I was going to be driven mad by the heat. It all made me ill and unhappy. The heat was incredibly unwelcome. Attention heat. I enjoyed your call, and so she makes this direct reference to the author, to what the author is doing. She relates to his content, and she makes a connection to it. Then she starts going line by line, which is very detailed. She says, attention heat. I enjoyed your call to the weather because we all tend to personify things as if they have control of their actions. The next quote is, I understand your purpose. Without any warmth, what sustenance would we eat? Again, it personifies weather with justifying the weather's action that are causing the human misery. This line is a reminder of saying, I understand, but. Next, she quotes, as I labor throughout the day, you will likely hear a curse. It allows the image to travel towards working outside. The critiquer writes that I'm experiencing the feelings of want, the one of air conditioning and iced tea, as much as my mouth dries and sweat drips to my brow. She writes, I enjoyed the quote, if left unprotected, you turn my skin crimson like a beet. Especially, again, to relate some personal context to this, I'm incredibly pale and redheaded, burn extremely easily. This line continues with the image of working outside on a hot summer's day. And the Everline weatherman is a real existence, has a real existence in your following line. The intensity of your existence can make the weatherman lie. I giggled at this line. You engulf me and everything nearby like 1,000 hairdryers. I found the line thoughtful, inventive, and continuous with the heat topic image. Quote, my dogs would agree with me, though not by speech. My Cocker Spaniel on the floor like a dead fish, not flapping. Justified your anger towards the heat by further explaining that animals equally despise of such weather. I enjoyed your line, I might join her if there was no chance of dirt or insects. So we've all experienced that moment of unrelenting heat and worried that we would get away with falling on the floor from misery. Thank you for your time. An unwelcome heat was a strong, sarcastic ending for the poem. So when we get in this really specific critique as we get things that are working, things that are not working, and strong connections. The other thing that might happen is the author might think to himself, well, I don't want to be that sarcastic at the end. Maybe I can change that a little bit. And that's absolutely fine. Then in the last paragraph, there are even more specific critiques. The writer writes, I suggest changing 1,000 to 1,000 in your line. You engulf me and everything nearby like 8,000 hair dryers. Sounds better to me personally, but it works either way. I would also change like a dead fish not flapping to like a dead fish no longer flapping. She says it seems a little awkward wording. I did not understand if it were not for wearing socks at night. You might hear me screech. I loathe waking my pets when it is late. Seeing roaches scatter about is very disgusting, as I was unsure where this fits with the heat. And maybe that it can be explained. She says, I have outdoor animals as well. Now, what I want to talk about next is actually the difference between workshop and discussion boards. In workshop, what you want to do is there's not as much discussion. You don't need to necessarily go back and check and respond to your peers that are posting your comments. You're more than welcome to. What I want to see happening in a workshop, is I want to see really strong critiques, emphasis on strengths. If people know where their strengths are, then they can bring the rest of their writing up to those strengths. What I want to see in discussion boards is actual discussion. We've been lacking on this a little bit. We've been making suggestions, and we've been really, really wonderful and really supportive in so many ways, but try to ask questions, try to generate a little conversation. If you don't go back and check your threads throughout the term or the week, try to go back and check a peer's thread and either ask one of your classmates a question or respond to a question that another person asked the original writer, okay? I think that'll help all of your discussion board grades out. You also want to remember that you can use and probably should start using sources in those discussion boards. I mentioned that on a lot of them last week. So just as a quick review, I did post in the PowerPoint, I did go ahead and include the workshop rubric again, and I did include a link to where you can find it in the notes. Sorry, this is taking a little longer than I expected. I'm not going to go over it this time, we did actually just talk about how workshop differs from discussion boards. I showed you that example of a student's feedback in our class to another student's. Remember that you're actually giving feedback in workshops and in discussion boards. I'd like to see more interactions, okay? Last but not least, your final portfolios. That I'm going to keep reminding you about these over and over and over, because this is the point of workshop and this is the point of everything that we're doing. It's because eventually that you are going to revise, okay? So at the end of the term, you'll submit revisions of 2 of your pieces. Yes, this means you can choose to resubmit your poem, your creative nonfiction piece, your narrative, your short story, or your screenplay. You have to pick 2. You may submit more than that. I'm also really happy to look at your revisions in between workshop, when they get workshopped and I give you feedback, and then between then and your final portfolio. The only one it's hard for me to do that on is your screenplays, because they happen really close to the end. Anyway, so here's what we did. Quick review. We talked about creative nonfiction, the importance of creative nonfiction and how to read it. We discussed your memoir, applying voice and imagery to it. We discussed Robert Olin Butler with a little bit of fiction and nonfiction to help you in this term and with your next assignment. We discussed workshop and its importance. We looked at some strong examples of workshop comments. We talked about workshop versus discussion boards. We reviewed what you need to be doing in workshop. And then we reviewed the portfolio requirements. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to be on and around until I have office hours from 6 to 8 p.m. tonight. So please contact me and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.